Good morning, Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We are on page 1417.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. We're in the middle of explaining the process of how we reach into the deepest levels of the divine superconscious, the divine transcendence, atik, and draw it into our lives, into existence. That's been the central theme here. So he began by explaining, well, not began, but on the previous page we discussed that anyone who answers Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah, V'chol Koichei, with all might, and which means with all his intention, so that draws from that place because it comes from Koyach 28, the power that energizes an extra surge that's able to be Mavatal Gzar Din, to abolish Keirin Lo Gzar Din, to abolish and eliminate Gvura and transform it into kindness, into compassion. How do we create such an intensification of power? So on page 1417, he's explaining B'chol Kavanose. What's Kavanose? He explained it with Kol HaMayrich Be'echad, that when you say Echad, you extend the word Echad, you lengthen it, you extend its expression. You don't just say the word, you extend it. When a person does that, it says that his life, his days and years will be extended. So the Rebbe Rashab is explaining what's the sarichus of Echad. You don't just say Echad, you say Echad. So the Pasuk says when Mashiach comes, B'yemahu will be Hashem Echad u'Shmai Echad. We need to understand what's Shmai. What is the name of God? What does it mean? What's the means of Shmai? So he explained that Shmai is made up of letters. Letters, Oisius in Hebrew, is from the word Asa. Asa Boika, the morning has arrived, the morning has risen. We have Asa Boika, which means a level of revelation. Letters reveal. So basically, the letters of a name, Shmai, indicate on the revelation that comes from the etzem of something, but it's only a reflection. It doesn't add and doesn't subtract from the core, just like sunlight doesn't add or subtract. And he gave the example like Eisis Hadibur, when a person speaks, so it doesn't add to the person himself when he speaks, it just reveals what's inside his heart and mind, what's inside his etzem hanefesh. So if he speaks more or less, it doesn't add or subtract from his nefesh. Like I said, the sunlight. And that's why Eid Ein Sof, the Gili of Eid Ein Sof, what is called in Zoyar, and in Kisra Arizal, he calls it Oir, light or energy, in Medrash, in Gemara and Medrash Shabbat, that's called Shem. Hayahu Shmai Bilvat. What's Shmai? Shmai is essentially another word for the word Oir, because Shem and Oir is the same thing. Okay. So that's the first point. The second point is that in Oisius themselves, in letters of expression and revealing, there are different types of letters. And we spoke about 3 types. Letters of speech, which are tangible, because anyone who hears it can hear the words in the letters and can sense what they are. But then there's letters that are lower than that, even more tangible, are Esis Hamaisa, like the written word. That's even more concealed. The energy is more concealed, and therefore the letters are more concrete. And in the parentheses, he spoke about the difference between our speech and the speech above. By God, his speech creates. Our speech doesn't create. So we have Dibur and Maisa, but the Eibishter has 2 levels in Dibur itself. The Dibur, as we spoke, speech that's higher than action, and the speech that turns into action. And then there are letters that are higher than speech, the letters in thought. So the letters in thought, no one except the person himself is aware of these letters because it's to yourself. So these aces are dakim v'ruchnim. They're more subtle and more sublime, more ethereal, because they're not felt to another. So what's the purpose of these letters? That even things that you yourself are not aware of, through these aces of the machshava, they become revealed. Like when you understand something you understand it with a framework of words and letters, but it's to yourself, it's not expressed to another, so the letters are more sublime. Essentially, the more the idea is in power, the less the letters are recognizable, which leads us to the next point, that in Isis and Machshav itself, there are two levels. An idea that's more an outer expression of an idea, there the letters are more prominent. But Primis HaSeichel, that's higher than Levush HaSaga, then higher than the garments of understanding, where you're like sensing the truth of an idea or the resonance, and you're like experiencing it. So there, when the person delves deeply into an idea, you don't really feel the letters. There are letters there, but you don't feel them because the experience is what is dominating. So he says, the last lines on the page where we reached, like we actually see, when a person exerts their mind in any deep thing, so there what's dominant is the idea that they're immersed in, and they don't feel the letters. And that's where we stopped, a line before the last on page 1417. So what you see here is exactly that. To use the language of Chassidus, the more the energy dominates, the kelim are less discernible. The more the kelim are discernible, in this case, the letters are concrete or tangible, it means because the idea is more concealed. So when you're completely submerged within an idea, you're not going to feel letters. The letters will emerge as it becomes more and more expressed, first to yourself, then to another, and then in the written word, which is as tangible as it gets. And we'll soon see what all this means, Lamaila, because this is all examples of how God interacts with existence. He can interact with existence where he relates to existence, and that's where the letters are very tangible. But then there's the divine energy within everything, like we learned earlier. There's the inner primus hakavana. That's not the chitzenius of something, it's the primus of something. Like we spoke, you build a building, so you need to have bricks and you need to have all the elements to build something. But what's the purpose of the building is for your children to have a home. That's more and less tangible. So we'll soon see how all this plays itself out. So let's continue now. As he explains, he continues this discussion of the different levels of how all this is coming to explain Shmoi. What is the name? When you say God and his name, what does the name represent? So it's becoming apparent the name represents God's manifestation in an expressive way. Oisius. The question is, which level of Oisius? So we have now speech, thought, and thought itself. There's a level where you don't even feel the Oisius. Even you yourself don't feel it. Of course, then there's the Oisius, the letters, as they come down into mice, into action, which he mentioned as well in the parentheses. But he's going to continue developing this idea of tangible kalim, or tangible letters when you express an idea. So just to simply state it, if I want to express an idea to you, I need to combine two things. An idea and the tools, not the tools, I should say, the handles, the words that I'm going to use to express it. If I just had an abstract idea in my mind and I don't have words, I can't communicate with you. Same thing in writing. A good author has an idea, that's like energy, and then he has to find the right way to express it. Like you'll see sometimes people have brilliant ideas, but they don't express well. They don't use the right words. They don't use enough words. They use too many words. So words are like the channels of anything. Any energy needs ways to be channeled. That's what we're addressing here. The question is, what's dominant? So in Dibur, the idea is being conveyed, but the letters are already being sensed by another. In thought, only you sense the letters, and then in deeper thought or deeper level of understanding, primis haseichel, you don't even feel those letters. And in written letters, it's the most tangible on the other end of the spectrum. So now he continues. Last line on page 1417. Pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So he says like this. All this, the understanding of an idea, is the power of Bina. Because Bina, remember, is comprehension. Chochma is just the spark of an idea. It's not developed yet. Everything we're talking about here, he says, is Bina. Whether you're explaining something to another through words, speech, whether you're thinking about it yourself, whether even if it's an idea that you're not feeling the letters, but it's still Bina because you're comprehending it. Shazel b'chinas hasoga. Bina is the idea of comprehending something. B'chol hasoga, and every comprehension, he b'chinas islapshus v'tfisa. Comprehension by definition. Every form of understanding something is islapshus. It's manifesting and enclothing in details and elaboration, v'tfisa, and is grasped. Next page, 1418. Shenitfasa in b'klei meiche. That the idea is being grasped like there's a handle that you're holding on to it. It's not just some abstract, amorphous idea. It's an idea that's manifest in garments that you can hold on to b'klei meiche with the container of your brain, of your mind. Shazeu inyan hasoga. That's what hasoga means. If something is beyond your comprehension, beyond your understanding, then it's just like an abstract light. So a bina, by definition, means that the energy is being contained in some way by containers of, and that's what's called understanding something. Vim kain, and being that that's what bina and hasoga comprehension is, how to yeshkan kalim. So it has to have containers. Containers here means letters, words, ideas, phrases, concepts, themes. Shagam b'bchin is primius hasoga. Also, primius hasoga, even though we said you don't feel the letters, but even primius hasoga, even a deeper understanding where you're really focused on the experience itself, not its expression, not its conveying, just the experience itself. Primius hasoga, being that you are comprehending it, it means you're grasping something here. So if that's the case, there has to be kalim. In other words, if you're thinking of an idea, even though you're not sensing the letters or the words, but the very fact that you're concentrating on this idea means that you have kalim. However, they're very subtle containers. You don't really feel them. They're subtle containers, but they're there. And therefore, they also have within them letters. But these letters are not sensed. They're not discernible. So like I mentioned, when you're reading something, or you're hearing something, or you're thinking about something that is like a beautiful memory, let's say. The last time you saw the Rebbe, or you're thinking about your child, or you're thinking about something very powerful, and you're completely absorbed in the experience. So you're not recognizing letters, even though it has to have letters because it has to have some way it's manifesting, but you're not sensing it. That doesn't mean there are no kalim. It means the kalim are not tangible. They're not discernible because right now the focus is on the experience that you're having, on the comprehension that you're having. Shein built in murgoshin. But they're there, but you don't feel them. Now he's going even a higher level. So we already have a few levels here. Dibur is Maisa, we already established complete tangible. Dibur is tangible to another, but it's not as tangible as the written word. Thought is only you see it, so it's even more subtle. Inner machshav, inner seichel, primius seichel, you don't feel the letters, even though they're there. Aval, that's all bina. Aval b'koyach ha-chochma. But the power of chochma, which is the initial spark of an idea, where it's not yet even developed. Shagam b'chin is gilui chochma. Even the gilui of chochma. We're not even talking about the concealed state where chochma originates from. The mere fact that you have a flash of an idea, a spark of an idea, the concentrated point of the idea before it's been fleshed out in Bina, That's not even a level of tfisa, because you're not grasping it yet. You're not understanding it. An idea, a flash of an idea came to you. So there's something there, but it's still so amorphous and so not defined that it's rak shemerachef al moiche. Merachef means like it hovers over your mind. But you can't say that you have handles that you've grasped it with. So in Bina, you could speak about the two levels of understanding something, and you sense the words or letters, and a level you don't sense the word. But there's tfisa. There's an understanding. You're grasping the idea. In Chochma, it's like a gift from above. A flash of an idea has come to you, an epiphany. But it's not yet been developed into understanding. So you can't say, I understand it. It's just a flash came your way. So he calls that merachef al moiche, so it's not even coming to keli, into the kelim. It's not tfisa b'klei meche, like we said before about Bina. So now the energy is even less attached to a container. Dal shem zeh, and due to that fact, that Chochma is just a flash, nikra brikas v'skiras haseichel. That's why it's called brika, means like barak hamavlik, like a flash of lightning, like a flash. The skira sasechel. Skira is like a gaze, just almost like a bird's eye view. Skira sasechel. So it's entered the world of seichel, but just barely, just like the flash of a lightning. It's just a flash. Shezeu k'moy barak levad. It's only like a flash, like a spark. She'ein b'chinas yashvus v'tfisa. It's not yet in a state. It's not in a state of settled and tfisa and graspable. Like it says elsewhere. So now we've come to another higher level than Bina. In Bina, you could have the deeper understanding of something and you don't sense the letters, but they're there. They don't sense the kelim, they're there. And in Chochma, the kelim haven't yet even emerged. There is one little keli because it's like a yud, because you need the chochma has become it's consciousness, but it's just the beginning. The birth of consciousness has happened. Think of it like the conception of a child. It's just one cell. It's not yet been fleshed out and developed. Al kain, therefore gamma ace is the sham, or ace is the shame. Ace is the shame, the sham. And therefore, the letters there in the level of Chochma have built in the Karim klal. They're not the Karim, they're not at all discernible. By Bina, we didn't say in the Karim, they're not discernible. We said they're not felt. But in Chochma, they're not at all discernible on their own. In other words, it's not just the person doesn't recognize it, they themselves have not yet been shaped. Even on their own, they have not yet turned into real containers. In Bina, there are containers, there are letters, except you're not feeling it because you're consumed with the very essence of the idea, with experience. In Chochma, it's more than that. It's not nikodim, more than not nirgish. Nirgish means I don't feel it. Nikod means it's not yet discernible. It's not defined yet. Even on its own, it's not defined yet. Because they're not a mohusa mitzias ba'atzman, because in Chochma, you only have a spark and you don't yet have a handle, in the full sense of the word. Let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything, any clarity. So we see here, he's literally climbing backwards from the bottom up, from tangibility and concreteness to abstraction, to the point where you just have the spark. So remember, we've spoken about consciousness, superconscious, how it moves from one to the other. These ideas are hard for us to sometimes fully grasp, no pun intended, because we are creatures of definition. So everything for us is things that we experience empirically. We see it, we hear it, we touch it, we smell it, we taste it, we measure it. Here he's talking about things that are slowly becoming less measurable. So in a concrete way, like I said, so words and letters are a tremendous example for how the divine ultimately becomes concretized into a reality. So like when you think of anyone, an artist, an author, an architect, they're taking an abstract idea and then slowly giving it body and shape and form, which is really the process of all of us when we take an idea that begins in a very, very abstract or amorphous way, very nebulous, and then slowly we start giving it body and shape and form. So Asis is a perfect example because the letters start becoming more significant as we go downward. So we already have, I can count here, letters of Maisa, which is letters, written letters, speech, thought. Speech itself, two levels, the way God speaks, our speech, thought. In thought itself, Chesenis HaSeichel and Primis HaSeichel and Bina. So that's 4 so far. And then Chochma now, 5. So he's gone through 5 levels as we go upward from the written word, the spoken word, the words of thought, to the point where you don't feel the words, to the point that the words have not yet even become tangible. On their own, they have not yet taken on shape, which is what he calls Chochma here. If you really counted more specifically, 6 levels, if you count the distinction that he made between our speech and God's speech. But 5 is good. That's good. Memaisa, Ibur, 2 levels of Machshava and Chochma. Okay. To continue on. And this is similar to the Koiches HaGiluyim, the revealed faculties, using an example from human faculties. So when we look at our revealed faculties, our expressed conscious faculties, in the distinction of the hierarchy, the different levels, one higher than the other, so just like in our revealed faculties, there's a hierarchy, there's a gradation, level to level. So too in our concealed faculties in the nefesh, like in our power of will, desire, and pleasure, and taanug, inner contentment. Sheyesham gamkein esis. Okay, let me explain what he's saying here. In the faculties of the person we know, there's koiches pnimim and koiches makifim, or what we call the spheres, is conscious expression, Chochma, Bina. So it's true, Chochma is just a spark, a dot, a concentrated point, as we learned. And Bina is developed, but they're both conscious. But then in the spheres, Keser represents levels. So Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama are the revealed faculties. Chabad, Chagas, Nihi. The behavioral faculties are Nefesh. The emotional faculties, Chesed, Gvur, Teferes, are Ruach. And the cognitive faculties, Chochma, Bina, Das, that's Neshama. Then comes Keser, Arich, and Atik. In Keser, those refer to the superconscious faculties. What does that mean? They don't have a location. Chochma, Bina, Das is right brain, left brain, center brain. Chesed, Gvura, Teferes is different right side, left side in the heart. They have a location. They have a particular function. When you say Ratzon, my will, it could be a will to think, it could be a will to feel, it could be a will to act. Ratzon is a makif. It's a central faculty that affects all the faculties. And Taanug is even higher than Ratzon, is the inner driving pleasure that we gain from everything. So when you talk about Ratzon and Taanug, you call them koiches nalamim. Because koiches gluyim are the cognitive, emotional, behavioral, conscious faculties. The superconscious is Ratzon and Taanug. This doesn't mean you can't feel that you have Ratzon and Taanug, except they're not definable in a specific way. So it says sheyesh sham gamkein. So now he's moving from Chochma to higher than Chochma. He's moving now Koiches Glim to the Koiches Nalomim. That sheyesh sham gamkein Asius. There's also the Chol Gilei Koyach, because the revelation of every faculty, why the Asius Kaneda. It needs to have Asius, because Asius are the channels that allow something to be revealed. Remember, we learned before that Asius are letters that come from the word Asa. They carry, they arrive. They basically, the carriers of any energy is the letters. So any type of expression, even if it's Ratzon and Taanug, has to have letters. The question is how tangible they are, how concrete, how much do we feel them, and how discernible they are. So everything has to have Asius Kaneda. Raksha Klolos to Asius Elu. However, these letters in the hidden faculties, meaning Ratzon and Taanug, hein lamayla b'madrega, they're on a higher level, ma Asius shebekeiches agluyim, from the channels of expression and the letters in the revealed faculties. So Bina, we clearly understand, Bina has absolute expression. Even Chochma is already a gilui, meaning there's a flash, so there's something there. But the concealed faculties, they also have, except they're in a higher level and more sublime, ethereal, basically Kalim. Because the concealed faculties, what he's talking about, the transcendent fact, they're higher than manifestation in containers. The power of the cognitive is in the brain, the emotional in the heart, like the vision in your eye. That's a faculty that has a location. It's an eir and a keli. The power of vision in your physical eye, the power of hearing in your ear. But the keiches alomim are beyond, transcend manifestation in containers. Valkain, that doesn't mean they don't have them. Valkain akelim va'esi is the sham. Ein b'chinas mitzias asius. And that's why their containers and letters of expression are not in the form of mitzias asius. They have not yet taken on any form of asius, of some definition. So let's go back to the example of the fetus. At the moment of conception, and you have a cell an egg that has been fertilized by a seed, and you have a cell, there's nothing discernible there. To say there's nothing there, you can't, because there is a seed. But it doesn't have yet, and then like he calls it, it's not a mitzias of asius yet. As the child will develop, you'll start seeing definitions will begin to emerge. So the same thing is here. Okay, so we've now moved to a level higher than Chochma. We've moved to Ratzon and Taanug, where there are letters, but they're not in any way mitzias yet. In Chochma, they're mitzias, but they're not yet shaped. In Bina, they're shaped, so you either don't feel them, or you feel them in a lower level. And in speech, they're obviously felt also by others, and in action, even more so. So just going through all these stages, he's now moved even higher now to the Keiches Nelomim, these concealed levels. Any questions? And I was going to go even further. So I now count 5. This is level 6, or maybe even 6 and 7 if you say Ratzon and Taanug as 2 separate. But let's call them at 1 right now. So now 6 higher than Chochma. And now he's going to go further and break this down too into 2 levels. So now he continues. Umakol mokim, and nevertheless, the chitzenius haratzon. In the now Ratzon too has a chitzenius and a primus. In the outer dimension of desire of will, ha'esis sem b'mitzias yeser. In this lack of mitzias itself, there's also a distinction. The outer will, the outer Ratzon, the letters have more mitzias, have more substance. Ukiyadua, the beratzon yesh bechinas primis v'chitzenius. As we know, Ratzon also, you can have an inner and an outer, just like we spoke about wisdom, intelligence can have inner and outer. In Ratzon too, you can have an inner dimension, an outer dimension. And he's going to explain. The premise of Ratzon, what does the inner desire mean? Hu Ratzon negei etzem nafshe. That desire that's negei benefesh is negei to the very core of who you are, of your soul. For example, the desire to protect your family or protect yourself, something that touches you at your core. His entire core soul is completely invested in this desire. It's not a superficial desire. It's not just, let's say, desire to eat something, where your etzem nafshe is not necessarily immersed in it. That's primis ratzon. It's also a desire, but it's not negay. It doesn't affect him, doesn't touch him to the core of his soul. So both are ratzon, they're both a desire, but they're not the same. And therefore, in something that's more of an external desire, a desire that's more superficial, you can say. The letters, the expression will be more felt. Because it's not something that he's consumed. If let's say you see someone that you love is in danger, the expression is not that important. It's the deep feeling that you have that you need to do something about it. Here, the letters are sensed more. Which means the garment that encloses this desire is more tangible, relatively speaking. Remember, it's less tangible than a Chochma, and even less so than in Bina. But in Ratzon itself, now he's distinguishing between an outer and an inner Ratzon. And the inner part of the Ratzon, when it's something really affecting you deeply, what you feel more is the Oyer. You could say the love in the example I gave for a family member. Or other types of Ratzon. It's a primis Ratzon, it's something really negated to you. So the Oyer, ve'ena esis nirgoshin. And the expression is not so felt. So, for example, if a person says, I want to go now for a walk, and it's an optional thing. So, yes, there's a desire, and it has a form of expression. It's called, I'm going to take a walk. So the walk, the details of where you're going to walk and how you're going to walk takes on more shape. But if it's something that touches you at your core, it's an emergency situation, or something of profound love, you're going now to walk your child to the chuppah, to the wedding. So yes, there is a technical part, you have to walk, but what's dominating there? What's driving you is driving that inner desire that I'm loving my child and I'm walking my child to the wedding, to the chuppah, just to use an example. So what's nirgish more is the oyer, the energy within it, not so much its expression. Ve'ena istis nirgoshin. Okay, I'm going to stop again. Any questions? It's quite fascinating how the Rebbe Rashab is building level by level, and then he's going to bring it all back to understand how it is Lamaila, that God chose to create in this fashion, investing himself, whether it's a matter of more energy or more tangibility, more expression. So it's quite interesting how this is developing now. And this is going to explain to us Shmoi, the name of God, and our kavanah. Interesting, very interesting. Any questions?
Can you say, when you're explaining that in Chitzonis Ratzon, there's already oisius? If somebody asks you, why do you want it? You could explain, I want to walk because I want to be healthy. When you say Pnimis Ratzon, you love your son, why do you love him? You have no words to express it. There's no oisius to express the depth of the Ratzon.
You could say that, yeah. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, that helps. But now the Rebbe Rashab is going to go even deeper into Taanug. Ratzon is desire, is will. What about Taanug? So he says now like this. I'm only smiling because I find this fascinating, just the whole dissecting level by level. Ubekayach HaTaanug now comes to the power of pleasure. which we know is Pnimius HaRatzon. Because Ratzon could be, I want something. It could be a deep Ratzon that's negated to you, or it could be a more superficial, external one, where you're doing something that you want to do. Taanug is already a deep level of contentment, a deep level of, it's even deeper in the nefesh. It says, though there are also letters. Like we said, there's no such thing as an oyer without letters. There has to be some form of expression. Like we learned earlier about Oisius is like shame, like gili. It's some form of expression. It's just the question is what's being expressed, the oyer, or you see the tangible manifestation of the expression. So it says in Taanug, even though there's also the letters there, aval einim nekarim klal, but there they're not in any way discernible. They're not recognizable. It means they're not shaped at all. Even more, he said that, I know he said that expression before on Chochma, but obviously it's all relative here. They're not going to distinguish between Ratzon and Einig. As it's known, the difference between wanting something and having pleasure in it, and pleasure here does not mean external pleasure. Pleasure means coming from a deep part of who you are. The Ratzon of B'chinas hispashtus, the gili ma'anefesh. Ratzon is hispashtus, it's an extension, it's an expression, extension, and a revelation from the nefesh. But Einig hu b'chinas aliyah v'helam. And Einig is the exact opposite. It's in a state of aliyah and helam, going inward. I'll explain what this means. Commission is bar li'il, as was discussed and explained earlier. Well, let me explain. We compare Shabbos often to Einig and Yom Tov to Simcha. But what is Einig different than Ratzon? Ratzon means I want something. As soon as you say I want something, you're already saying I need to reach to it. That's why Ratzon is from the word merutza, from the word sinoir. Ratzon is like Ratzon, you're drawn to something. Taanug, you don't have to be drawn to it. Taanug means where you are right now, you have a profound pleasure. We talked before about loving your child. So there's two aspects. You can love your child and not have any Ratzon at all to connect to your child. Your child could be living somewhere, but you have fundamentally 24/7 a deep love within you. And it's really an internal level of contentment and experience. It's not reaching. The Taanug could then awaken and stimulate. I love my child so much, I want to reach out to my child. I'll call my child. I'll go see him, or he'll come see me or her. So Ratzon is the active process, called active, of reaching to something. Now, in Ratzon itself, we've learned you could have Aleisa Ratzon, you can want something and not actively, like for example, a person is born with a natural desire to have a home. Ein odem b'lei bayis. But it could be 20, 30 years before you actually act on it. But the Ratzon is there, embedded in you. In a way, you could call that chayfetz or primis Ratzon, even a Taanug. So generally, Ratzon is once you're already acting, or something has been stimulated that's causing you to reach out to something. So we have many things we have Taanug in that have not necessarily manifested in a Ratzon. They could not. Look, the very fact, for example, a person, let's say, Sameach Bechelke is a very happy person in life. Contentment, you're happy God created you. You feel blessed with your life. You feel blessed with the gifts you were given, and so on. That doesn't necessarily have to have a Ratzon. That's just an inner sense of satisfaction and contentment. It's actually, like he says, aliyah v'helam. It's a very personal thing. It's like the king in his inner chamber is just satisfaction from his very being. Ratzon is now the king wants something, wants to pass a decree. Ratzon hamelech. So his desire means he's reaching for something. It could be driven by the Taanug, and in most cases it is, as Chassidus explains. But it's a second state. Now you are reaching to something. So in the inner superconscious faculties, what we call the concealed faculties, Taanug is higher than Ratzon. Even though there's a discussion which is higher than which, in Samach Vav and Ayin Beis, he also spoke about it, but it's not relevant to our discussion. For all practical purposes, Arich in Keser is Ratzon and Atik is Taanug, generally speaking. So that's the difference between them that he's saying here. So Ratzon is Pashtus Begili Mahanefesh, but Einig hu b'chinas Aliyah v'Helam. On its own, Einig is an internal thing, very intimate and concealed. Ratzon is an expression when the king says, I want something, or not just the king, each of us is already a form of, a certain form of what I want to say, extension. An extension is going on. Val Cain, and therefore Ha'esi is the Sham, and built in the Kadin Klal. So Ratzon, by definition, already has a definition because it's reaching. Yes, there's a difference to Chitzenius Ratzon, where the letters and the expression is more tangible, and Pnimius Ratzon, where it's not that tangible. It's not, you're not nikr. But Taanug is altogether a state of Aliyah and Helam. There's no extension altogether. So since there's no extension, the Asis and Ein Nekadim Klal, because there's no need for it. There's no form of expression. You don't even need to define anything. It's just an internal inner sense of contentment or pleasure or inner satisfaction, whatever the word you want to use. The Kfan is boile ill, and it was already explained earlier. The Bechlolis Asis Elu, that in general, these letters, he's talking about the Keiches Nelomim, of these concealed faculties, Ratzon and Taanug, Hein Lamayla Me'asis the Keiches Agluyim. They're higher than the letters of the revealed faculties. She'enu b'chinas mitzias mamish. Because the letters, as they are in Ratzon and Taanug, any level, relative to the revealed faculties, they're not mitzias mamish. They're not an actual entity. There's something there because they have to have a form of expression. Even Taanug, he says they're letters, but they're not mitzias mamish. U'makom mokem hariyesham esis. And nevertheless, you have to say they're esis because there is ultimately some manifestation. Even of that inner Taanug that's not reaching and not extending, there's still something there. So you have to say there is some esis, some gili. It's not etzem mamish. Remember this, it's not etzem hanefesh mamish. It's close to the etzem. It's expressing the etzem. But the etzem hanefesh defies any form of esis in any gili, which we'll soon learn about. Or if not, we'll discuss. Okay. Any questions? Because he's going to go now deeper into the Etzem HaNefesh now and see what's going on there. Okay. Just wondering whether we should start the next section here. I'm just reading on. I want to just see what he's going to be saying. Okay. The next section, which I think I'm going to learn the next year. I'll wait. I don't want to begin because it's a whole piece. In the next section, he's going to talk about now Etzem HaNefesh itself. Because till now, we spoke about the revealed faculties. We went through Bina, Chochma, the concealed faculties, desire and pleasure. Then he's going to talk, what about the Etzem HaNefesh itself? And he's going to explain the Etzem HaNefesh also has letters. And he's going to prove why. Because there could not be letters in the faculties, both the hidden and revealed faculties. There were no letters in the Etzem HaNefesh. But they're completely non-tangible. Completely not. So that's going to be the next section. He's going to explain that. It's really the rest of the page. Next half of the page is going to talk about the etzem nefesh, where actually the letters are born, where they actually conceived. In a way, you could say, just like a conception of a child, you cannot say that whatever happens later with the child's development all had to be there in the concentrated first cell that developed upon conception. So we're going to discuss that, but I'll wait. I think we should do that in the next class. So what we've learned so far is a process of how Eris manifests in Kalim, in containers, or like he said, energy manifesting in letters and expression, all to come to explain what Shmoy is. When we say Hayahu Shmei Bilvad, that God and his name, what is his name? So we already established name is Gilui, Oir, and that's the way things manifest. The question is, how tangible is the manifestation and expression, or how less tangible it is, less concrete. And the higher you go within our soul, within our faculties, obviously more oir and less keli, more energy and less expression. And he's going to now explain how it is in Etzem HaNefesh. And then the next page, on 1490, he's going to say, what is a dugma? He's going to explain all this above. And from that, we're going to understand Shmoi, the name of God, as being God's way of expressing himself. And in Shmoi itself, we're going to find all these levels, from the most tangible to the least tangible, all the way to Shmoi HaKol Batzmusei, which we've been learning is the Hela Ma'atzmi, all the way in the deepest levels, that the Shmoi and who is Shmoi are like one. Him and his name are one. As we shall learn. So just to give you somewhat of a sense of where this is going. I remember in Rebbe Rashab talks about these subjects in other places, but I don't remember quite as organized, systematically going step by step as he's doing here. It was quite fascinating, as I said. Any questions? So I'm going to stop here by the line Mitzias Mamish from the words Vihini Yadua will continue out tomorrow. Middle of page 1418. Any questions? Wow. Okay.